Hi everyone, Danny Bader here, and welcome to another episode of Back to Life, our podcast where I interview people from all walks of life to hear their stories and the insight and wisdom they've gained on this wonderful journey called life. So enjoy the episode and be sure to pay attention to what inspires you to create more happiness and fulfillment in your life, because that's what we're here for, right? Welcome to episode 21 of our Back to Life podcast. I am your host, Danny Bader, and I'm very excited for our guest today, Jennifer Lynn Robinson. We all have our stories and our challenges in life, and there's an opportunity for all of us to be inspired by the journey and the resilience of others. And this is the case for this episode. Imagine that you're a newlywed and successful attorney early in your career. One afternoon, you're walking along a city street, and you're suddenly struck and hit by a truck, being drugged and then pinned underneath. You're fully conscious, your face and your arm are crushed, your clothes are being cut off to be attended to by emergency personnel. And as you bleed profusely, one of the medical people on site is saying that you may not make it out of here. I'm so thankful for our guest today, Jennifer Lynn Robinson, as she shares her courageous story of tragedy, pain, suffering, and ultimately resilience. Jennifer talks about the importance of her attitude and her support network as she made her inspirational recovery. So let's get started with Jennifer Lynn Robinson. Hi, everybody, and welcome to our episode of Back to Life with our guest today, Jennifer Lynn Robinson. As you heard, I read some of Jennifer's bio for you before we got started here, but I think you're going to find Jennifer delightful, insightful, and her story certainly very, very inspiring. So Jennifer, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Good. So you and I first met, I guess, about a month or so ago at an event here in Philadelphia. We had some common friends.
Yes.
And, I found out about your story, right? Because we all have a story, and that's really the basis for a lot of this podcast, Back to Life. Because I think we all know we learn from the stories of others, right? So they tell their story, but somehow it connects with us.
Absolutely.
So your story is you were down in Pennsylvania, University of Pennsylvania.
Yes.
And you were hit by a truck, drugged by a truck,
basically all of it.
Tell us what happened. Tell us what happens. Listen in here. Tell us what happens.
So it was May 15th, 2008. I was a newlywed and a litigator, and I had taken the afternoon off for a routine doctor's appointment, thinking I'd go to the appointment and then have the afternoon off because my youngest sister was actually getting married the next week.
Okay.
So the idea was I'd go to my doctor and then help her with some wedding stuff and have the afternoon off.
Okay.
So I went to my appointment, and then I was literally walking from 34th and Spruce, from Hupp, onto 31st and Walnut, which is where she was living at the time. So a few blocks, right? And I got hit and then pinned underneath a truck as a pedestrian.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, you had graduated from Haverford College.
Yes.
And then Villanova Law School.
Yes.
Where you excelled.
I definitely excelled at Haverford by the end. Not at the beginning, but by the end. Law school, I would say, I was an average to better than average student for Villanova Law standards. I had things I was very good at. I was very good at trial work, so that was definitely a strength of mine, and obviously that's what prompted me to become a litigator and a trial lawyer. I wasn't one of those law review students.
Right. So at this point, this afternoon now, in 2008, right?
Yeah.
I mean, your life's good.
Life is good.
Life is rolling. You worked hard. You've gotten where you wanted to get for this phase of your life.
Yes.
And then what? Tell us what happened. What do you remember about this?
Unfortunately, I remember everything because when the accident happened, I didn't lose consciousness till they put me in the ambulance. So I remember everything happening. I remember being literally stuck under a truck because...
so tell us the story. Did you see it coming at you? Did it hit you from behind? Or?
I did not see it coming at me. I was in a crosswalk, and what I was told later was the truck was making a left, and the sun got in his eyes, so he had a blind spot, hit me. There was actually a second impact. The first impact, I didn't see it coming. I just knew I was on the ground. And then I saw that something was coming at me, and I tried to prop myself up with my arm, but my arm was crushed. I didn't realize it at the time. I didn't know what was going on. Everything was happening so fast. But I tried to prop myself up, couldn't, and then I literally got run over. I mean, literally my body was crushed under the truck. My whole body, my face, everything. Yeah, so, literally right here, I'm looking at the underbelly of the truck. Couldn't open my eye. Everything was crushed. My head, everything.
And then the truck stopped.
No, the truck...
Not immediately. I'm sure it went a couple feet.
Right.
Wow.
So yeah, so they couldn't actually put me in an ambulance right away because I have this truck on top of me. So I'm conscious. I'm freaking out, obviously.
Oh my gosh.
Everything I can feel like everything is bleeding and hurt and just bones are broken and everything. They have to get another truck with some kind of device to get this truck off of me in order to put me in an ambulance.
So the truck is on top of you.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was going through your head?
I mean, there were people around me right away, thank God,
Yes.
that were trying to talk to me, like people on the street, like good people.
Our so-called angels, right?
Yeah.
They are all around, aren't they?
Yeah, so that was great, and then it literally seemed like within seconds there were EMT, I guess because the hospital was so close, I don't really know, but I mean there were people, medical personnel were around me right away, but it was, but like I said, I was stuck there. So I remember a few things that are really kind of painful to talk about, but I will talk about them.
Okay.
One is, I remember one of the medical personnel saying something to me to the effect that if I didn't find a way to slow down or regulate my breathing, I wasn't going to make it out of there. And that's like very hard to hear because you're like, you're still trying to process what happened.
You heard them say that. They didn't say it to you.
They said it to me. They said it directly to me. Yeah. So that's very hard because the adrenaline's going, a million things are wrong and you can't even process what had happened. And then, I've read a little bit about you and your life, kind of the back to life experience. So I didn't feel like I, died for a minute and saw the light or the tunnel that everybody talk about. But I did have this experience where I felt that I was above the scene of the accident. I could see myself. I could see everybody around me, but I wasn't really present there. I know it may sound crazy to people watching, but
it doesn't sound crazy to me at all. And some of you out there,
yeah,
there's only 5% of the adult population report having a near-death experience.
Yeah.
So most people can't relate, and that's okay. But I think a lot of people believe that there's a fine line between here and there.
Yeah.
And some of us dance a whole lot closer to that line sometimes.
It was wild.
Yeah.
I mean, and I felt like, almost like when you hit fast forward on a movie and things go really fast.
Yeah.
I started having all these images of things in my life and all these thoughts about, different people in my life. And I'm sure it was pretty short-lived because probably this whole thing seemed like it was very long and was probably not long.
Yeah, there's
at all.
no time in these moments.
Yeah.
Most people know that. I mean,
Yeah.
there's no time in these moments. No worldly time.
No.
No.
Yeah.
So were you, I mean, obviously you were thinking maybe you're going to die, maybe you're...
Yeah, I definitely was thinking that. I was thinking I was either going to die there or, I was going to be paralyzed or, you're just thinking the worst. But of course, what I'm thinking more than anything is my sister's wedding is next week. I'm like, I cannot believe this is the way this is going to go down.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, literally in my head, I'm like, I cannot believe, my poor sister, like everything's going to be overshadowed, Yeah.
So then take us along. So they get the truck off you, I guess.
Yes.
And then what's the next?
Yeah, then they put me in, and I remember having all my clothes cut off on the street. Like I remember people saying, "Oh my God, cover that poor girl up," and like thinking to yourself, "It is what it is,"
And at this point, you don't give a shit about that,
you're
right?
Like,
Listen, save my life.
I remember that. I do remember
Take my clothes off and save my life.
So, so I remember them putting me in the ambulance, and then I don't remember anything until I woke up and I was in the ICU with it seemed like 10 or 15 doctors and medical staff around me. Yeah, at Huff. Yeah. So I mean, it was like you wake up, you see the white walls, all the medical, noises of the machines, and all kinds of people talking and trying to do things, and you're like, what is going on?
Right. And so what happened there then?
Yeah.
You were conscious. They came in. I mean, what was the extent of your injuries?
Yeah, it was pretty bad.
Physical injuries. Yeah. We'll talk about upstairs.
Yeah, physical injuries at the immediate was facial fractures. A brain injury, a hemorrhage in my eye, 8 broken ribs, a crushed right arm, a collapsed lung. I had what I thought was going to be the worst injury. My bone had actually gone through my knee, and that ended up actually being the most minor injury. It looked the worst, but it ended up just being like stitches and things like that. So those were the immediate physical things, but then there was a lot of physical stuff that was secondary that either I or the doctors were not really taking note of at the time that developed. So, I mean, I ended up having a number of other surgeries related to things physically over the next couple years, and then chronic problems with, back, neck, hip, knees, all kinds of stuff.
All that connectedness.
All the stuff that, you wouldn't realize right away. But I think the stuff I described to you was the immediate stuff. Sometimes I forget some of it.
Yeah,
so,
right.
Yeah.
So then your journey after that, take us on that you're in the hospital for how long?
I was in the ICU for a week, ICU trauma at HUP. And I basically, the whole time, I was arguing with them that I had to go to my sister's wedding. I wasn't going to miss her wedding. Thank God it was local.
Yes.
So, and it's this weird
thing.
So
you knew you were back then because you were telling these people what was going on. The litigator and you came out.
Right. I just wasn't going to miss it.
Right. Here's the facts. Right. Here's the facts. And
I wasn't doing well. Like, by no means was I doing well.
I can imagine.
And it's, then people come in and especially my dad and my husband would sit in the room and talk about me like I wasn't there. Not because they thought I was not conscious. I was conscious. I guess, and I would start saying, I'm here. I can hear what you're saying. And they would say, oh, she thinks she's going to this wedding this week, and we have to convince her that she's crazy and all this. And I'm like, I'm not crazy, and I will be at that wedding.
Love it.
So with ICU trauma, you actually are in a special rehab at the hospital. It's separate from like the general rehab. So it's kind of a really scary rehab because everybody in that rehab has had things happen that are as bad or even worse than what you went through. So it's all gunshot victims, stab wounds, terrible catastrophic accidents like I had. Like, it's terrible, terrible. Like, you don't have people with minor rehab going on.
Right.
It's a special rehab that they have there. And also the hall that you're on has people with those kinds of situations. So while you're, in your hospital bed, like, you're hearing, like, whatever it's called, the code reds or code blue. Like, you're hearing all this stuff going on. And it's a scary place. I mean, the staff was amazing, but it's a very scary place. So I was there for a week. During the time I was there, they rebuilt my right arm. They had told me initially I might not have use of it again. They were trying for a few days to put it back together.
Thankfully you do,
Thankfully
right?
I do.
Yes.
I do have some permanent nerve damage, but I'm thankful. So they ended up doing like a very complex surgery there. That was the only surgery they actually did during that week. And then I did go to the wedding. I stayed downtown. They wheeled me to Brasserie Perrier for my sister's rehearsal dinner.
Yes.
Then they wheeled me to Pyramid Club for her wedding.
Yes.
I don't remember much of it. I was so highly medicated. And, the poor people who were trying to do like hair and makeup for us. And I had so much like bruising and couldn't stand up straight because of the broken ribs. Like there was a lot going on, but I was like, I made it. Yeah. So I mean, even if my memory of it is from the photographs, I still feel very proud of myself that I was there.
Right. What do you think? What do you think the force? This is great. What do you think the force was that inspired you? Right. Definition of inspiration is to cause something to happen. What was the force that inspired you to make your sister's wedding versus to just go, hey, it's me, I'm hurt, and what was going on there?
I think it was two things. I think it was what I said a few minutes ago, which was I knew that her wedding would be overshadowed by this, which I'm sure it still was in some way because the family was going through a lot, But, the idea that I wouldn't be there and that would be what everybody was talking about instead of her day, like I didn't want that,
Right.
But it was also that everybody was telling me I couldn't do it. Because I'm stubborn, right? So, when I was talking about that trauma rehab, there was basically when I went there the first day, I was like, what are the things that I need to do here to convince you that that I can go to this wedding? You tell me, like in the next few days, what has to happen in order for you to sign off for me to leave, and we're going to make it happen.
I love it. It's a very simple equation right there, right?
Absolutely.
Jennifer's vision was wedding.
Yes.
Right? Imagine what needs to be real.
That was really my only focus.
And then action.
Yes.
Vision and action.
Vision and action.
Core principle of Jackrabbit.
Yes.
Great, good. How about what was going on in your head mentally then after that?
Yeah, mentally it was, I feel like that first week or so, it was actually an upbeat time, if that makes sense, even though that may sound crazy, because you hit this moment where you say, I was chosen. Like, most people who get hit by a truck like this don't survive. You see it on the news every night. I survived. Like, I'm amazing. This is a happy moment. Like, it was uplifting. Even with all that happened, like, you get to that point where you say, well, I'm not going to die from these injuries. Life is going to go on. I'm going to get to this wedding. Like, all these things.
It's a lot of gratitude.
A lot of gratitude. But then, the afterwards of that, then I went home after the wedding, and I had pen care at my house for 2 months, and I was at Bryn Mawr Rehab for 7 months, and then years of, different rehab surgeries, treated at a place called Remed for brain injury, trauma, and head injuries, and just a number of places and things. And during that time, I would say, once that kind of moment leaves you of like, I've survived, I'm awesome, then a lot of other things set in.
Sure.
And which was mostly anger.
Yeah.
Mostly anger and depression.
So what was that? So talk to somebody out here again. It's I'm sure there's somebody listening right now that's going through a tough time.
Yeah.
Maybe tougher than what you had.
Sure.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
But I think there's core principles that move us all as human beings and kind of stoke the human spirit.
So here you are, you're back, you're going to live,
Right.
and you went to the wedding, and now anger shows up. What was that like?
It was very hard. I mean, before the accident, I was gregarious and outgoing and social, and I just became a different person. I would lash out, I would cry, I would stare at the walls. I was on all kinds of heavy medication. My husband and I were having a lot of problems, obviously. I mean, he was doing his best. I mean, don't
Sure.
get me wrong, but I mean, to go from where I was to what he had to deal with, as a newlywed,
Right.
It was a lot. I didn't see people, I didn't return calls, and I had anger even at the most basic level. Like, I would watch him leave for work, and I would be angry and start an argument with him because I was jealous of the fact that he could go have a normal day and I couldn't.
Right.
That I was going to be picked up to go to rehab.
So a lot of the victim mentality,
The
right?
victim
We feel sorry
mentality.
for ourselves.
Yep, and then the whole reliving the accident. Why did this happen to me? I just started reliving parts of that day. What if I didn't have a doctor's appointment? What if I hadn't taken the afternoon off? What if I had waited to cross the street? Like when I first got up to the crosswalk, there was 4 seconds or so left to cross. Like it was the end of the crosswalk, and I thought that's not enough time for me to cross the street. So I'll wait a whole light cycle and then cross. And I was like, what if I didn't wait? Like all these things go through your head. So
I do, the second guessing, right? And
Yeah.
then that just fuels the anger, right?
Oh yeah.
That just fuels I'm angry, and now I'm going to blame everybody else. I'm going to second guess myself.
Yes.
I'm going to play the what if game.
Yep.
Psychiatrists.
Initially a psychologist that helped me deal with PTSD,
Right.
depression, anxiety, anger, all kinds of issues. Then after her,
And
psychiatrist.
did you find one that worked for you, or
Yeah.
did you go through a few like I did? I went through them like underwear there. I was going through priests and psychiatrists like it was nothing. This one doesn't work. This one doesn't work.
I've been there. Like, we went to family therapy at one point when I was younger, and I remember going through a few. But this time I lucked out. It was a recommendation of a friend,
Great.
and she ended up being my psychologist for 6 years. She referred me out to different psychiatrists for medication, and then at some point I had a sleep trauma psychologist or something to help me with that, with nightmares and everything, because I was reliving the accident because I wasn't unconscious. And so it was a lot. But no, I mean, the therapy, I started therapy within a month of the accident.
Good.
And I think that made a major, major difference in, what you see here today.
You hear that?
Yeah.
Hear that? Anybody out there listening, right?
Yeah,
Asking for help is not
Asking
a sign
for
of
help.
weakness, man. We
Yeah.
get broken, right? Physically, mentally.
absolutely.
And there are people that can help us, so go get some support. If you have that question right now and you're going, maybe I should go see somebody, maybe I shouldn't, maybe I can work through my life. If that's showing up, I think that's an indication that you go find somebody.
Yeah, and I mean, that's something
It's
I've
gonna
tried to
support
be
you.
really open about, because
Good.
like you're
And
saying,
you
I
are.
mean, there's so many people that are going through so much, and there's, like I realized with my husband's family, at the time, like his parents, they've since passed away, but they had this mentality where I remember his mom saying something to me like, well, we don't really believe in therapy, but you were hit by a truck, so it's okay. And, there's a lot of people that have, I mean, she was a lovely woman, but I mean, there was just
Sure.
people that have a different mentality
Well,
about
yeah.
therapy.
Yeah, it's so
yeah.
many people that they don't understand what we experience, just like we don't understand. But that's the whole thing. They don't have to.
Right.
Too often they don't understand. They say something from that frame of reference that sounds really ludicrous to us.
Yes.
But I think it's all of us too to understand that by them saying something, that's an expression of love, perhaps, right?
Absolutely.
That they care. They're just not sure what the hell to say, but at least they said something.
It was tough because, what I haven't mentioned is that the time that I had the accident, went to the hospital, my husband's father was dying of cancer. And then in a very short time frame, I would say about 18 months, we lost his father, his mother, and my mother.
Yeah.
And we lost our mothers the same week.
Yeah.
So that, 3 out of 4 parents, and dealing with the aftermath of the accident, losing, like, not only everything we went through, but then losing my salary and, having those fights with mortgage
So
companies
you had
and
pressure,
bills
everything.
and, just all of it.
Human loss, which is the biggest
Yeah.
one, trauma, financial pressure.
All of it.
You had it all.
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, the therapy was life-saving.
Right.
I was trying to convince my husband to also go to therapy. I couldn't convince him. That goes back to
we
the
husbands-
people have to want to do things for themselves,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Yeah.
And we,
They have to
we
reach out to
husbands
me.
are a little stubborn once in a while. We
Yeah.
need another kick.
Yes.
Hi, everybody. It's Danny, and I am trusting that you are enjoying our conversation with Jennifer and gaining some insight and inspiration from her and her story. Sure is interesting. We'll get right back to it. But I just wanted to let you know that the Jackrabbit t-shirts are available at DannyBader.com in our shop. People have been asking for some time because I usually give these T-shirts out at workshops, and they say, hey, can we get some of those? So here's the thing. You got your Jackrabbit T-shirt with the motto on back. You have the DLDSM T-shirt, which stands for Don't Let Dumb Shit Matter, and that's printed on the front. Messages, right? Jackrabbit isms. And then you have the other one, IABWV. It all begins with vision. So if you need to be reminded of something, or somebody you know needs to be reminded of a certain message to pay attention to, go ahead out and grab a T-shirt. The best thing about them is that for every T-shirt sold, we are donating $5 to the ALS Therapy and Development Institute up in New England, who is doing tremendous research. And their main vision, you know I'm all about vision, their vision is to cure ALS. So I just wanted to drop in and let you know, maybe take a look over there and check them out. Thanks. Now back to the podcast.
So, a lot of times when I talk with people who have gone through trauma like you, and they'll say I had this I'll call it a moment of decision. I had that moment of decision where I said, damn it, it ain't going down this way.
Yes.
This is not going down this way. Did you have a moment of decision?
I did.
Tell us about it.
It was actually about 3 years later. It was the beginning of 2011. We had just lost both of our moms, and I had felt that I was doing a little better. I was still, actively going to treatment and having surgeries, but I felt like I was doing a little better. I was back at work part-time, not back in court because of the brain injury, but back at more of a desk job part-time. And, things weren't going well, but they were going better than in 2008 when I initially had the accident.
Great.
Then we lost our moms, and I, had some kind of break with reality. It was just all too much for me, especially because my mom was pretty unexpected. So I went to my therapist, and she called it you're suffering compounded trauma, where you have trauma you're not better from, and then there's more trauma.
Yeah.
And it made sense, but you're like, okay, so now what?
Life's just piling on, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So I ended up leaving my job for good, which was a very difficult decision because it was the only really, in my mind, a normal thing that I had left. It was the only part of my old life that I was still trying to hold on to. And I went home, this was maybe February, March of 2011, and I can't really tell you what I did for most of the rest of the year, except that I probably put on about 50 pounds, and I was really depressed, and some days I didn't get dressed. And then, I had that moment you're talking about where I thought, I've been on all these medications, seen all these specialists, been to these doctors, and frankly, here I am. It's not much better. I have people telling me, and when I say people, I mean until that point where my mom had passed, my mom was one of those people who was basically like, it's terrible this happened, but now that this happened, you should just basically sit on the couch and call it a day. Basically, in so many words, this is your defining moment, and you don't need to try to do anything after this because you're just lucky you survived.
Yeah.
And I had that moment where I thought, is this the way I want to live my life? I can barely get around.
You remember the moment?
I do.
Where were you? Take us into it.
I was sitting in the family room with the dogs, and I was crying by
With
myself.
The dogs?
Yep. Eating, I think, a plate of fried rice that I didn't need to be eating. Just didn't fit in any of my clothes. Hadn't really gotten dressed that day. Brushed my teeth. Just staring at the walls, crying, and just thinking, this can't be all there is. This just can't. This can't be the rest of my life. I can't live my life like this. And there's that moment where you think, bless all the people that tried to help me, family, friends, doctors, everything. But there has to be something in your own head where you say, even though this wasn't my fault, what happened, you have to still take some responsibility for coming out of that. You have to have the will to say, this is not what's going to be the last chapter here,
Good.
So, and I think it was because my mom had died and she had had a lot of physical and mental problems that got worse over time. Not that would have killed her at the time that they did, had she taken care of herself, and that's a whole other story. But in essence, I started thinking a lot about her and her life, how much I felt like she had going for her, and how she never saw it.
Right.
She just really never got the help she needed, and never saw that she had so much else going for her. And I thought, I don't want to be that person. That's not something I want to continue.
So that almost caused you to look in your own proverbial mirror.
Absolutely.
And say, hey, you, me, us, we.
Yep.
Let's get our ass going.
Yep.
Good.
Yeah.
And so you get your butt in gear, and what did that look like then? So
Yeah.
you had the moment now, and here you are.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
What
I decided I was going to start a business.
Yeah.
And really, you know, I never had any plans to be an entrepreneur, didn't want to be an entrepreneur. You know, I wanted to continue on the path I was on before the accident, but realized that because of all the brain injury stuff I was dealing with, memory loss, you know, word finding, you know, couldn't be in places with fluorescent lighting or multiple conversation or stimuli. I mean, I wasn't somebody who would go back to a regular job,
Right.
At least at that time, right? I couldn't do a regular 9 to 5 where I had to interact with people and function.
Sure.
So I started a business out of necessity, thinking, you know, I'm going to start doing consulting and I could do it on my own schedule. You know, if I can only see one client a week, you know, that's something, right? But actually, let me even backtrack from that. I think before I started the business, at the end of that year, I started volunteering. I had always volunteered. Volunteer was a big presence in my life.
Yeah.
But I hadn't really been out much in public except for my rehab and, you know, once in a while with my husband. Like, it had been a really terrible time of a couple of years. But I decided, like, I need to get back into volunteering because I need to do something. It was really, like, more selfish than it was altruistic. Like, as much as there were causes I loved and I wanted to help, it was more like, let me do something that's bigger than myself because it will get me on a schedule, get me out, get me to have responsibility again, and get me thinking not just about my own misery, but about, like, all this other stuff.
Right.
You know?
So being in service to other people.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's such a good, you know, I'll stop and drive that point home because when I asked you what was that force that caused you to go to your sister's wedding to really make that, and you said, I don't want to overshadow it. I want it to be her day. So you're coming from a place of selfless, right?
Yeah,
of love.
I mean, definitely. Yeah.
And the same thing when you say, I feel like crap right now.
Yeah.
I got run over by a truck, but I'm going to go help other people.
Yeah, I mean, that was basically, but like when I say it was also selfish, it was also like, I'm going to see how this goes.
Mm-hmm.
And if I feel like this is something I can even stick to any kind of schedule with, where I'm telling people I'll report one day from 1 to 4, can I actually do that? Can I report from 1 to 4?
And then check the box. You did it, right?
And I did it.
And you did it.
So, you know, then I decided I would start the consulting business. I really didn't want to do consulting. I love public speaking. I love being in front of groups. I did trials. I like, you know, interacting with people. I wanted to start a business doing what I'm doing now, which is more, you know, workshops and speaking to groups.
Sure, yeah.
But I was in no position to do that.
Right.
And I was being told that wasn't going to be a realistic possibility for me. Which, again, you know, when people tell me it's not, you know, I think you're probably the same way, right? So, yeah.
They tell you it can't be done.
Yeah. I mean, you know, they didn't tell me no. They, you know, I don't want to minimize all the help that everybody at rehab gave me, but, you know, they try to prepare you for the worst. And they would say things like, we're not sure how realistic it's going to be for you to go back to something where you're going to have to be speaking in public most days. That's not going to be that realistic for you for where you are and what you've suffered.
Yeah.
And I thought,
there's a fine line between realistic and possible, though, right?
Yeah.
A fine line between that.
Yeah. So, you know, long story short, I now we're years later, and I've basically, as I've gotten better, I've done more and more public speaking and less consulting. So now I have just a few private clients I take on at once, and mainly I just do the fun part for me, which is the speaking and all that.
Yeah. So let's take us to where you are, and then we'll kind of circle back and wrap up, and I'll ask you to offer whoever's listening out there, what are 3 messages that you would offer them as they struggle through life? And we all struggle, right? We all get stuck in a struggle. We all are in search of inspiration. Any of those. So what are you up to now, and where can people find you? Tell us about that a little bit.
Yeah, so
I like that. Like I said, we just met not too long ago, but I love your energy and everything. So what are you up to?
So I do keynotes, I do workshops, I go into companies, law firms, conferences, nonprofits, basically whoever hires me, and I teach people how to network better.
To
network better. And so that's actually been a big part of my recovery, is learning that as I integrated myself more back into society and had more human connection and interaction, what that felt like for me. And then also when I started the business, you know, I was smart enough to realize at the time that I couldn't sit in a house, stare at the walls, and cry and grow a business, right? That wasn't going to work. So I had to get out and hustle and grow a network very, very quickly. I was only known in the legal community by my little circle of defense and plaintiffs' attorneys. You know, so nobody knew me as a consultant or speaker. So all of that, I think, led me to understand the value of human connection and feel like when people are able to do that, they're able to improve every aspect of their life. It's not just the business, it's personal, it's their relationships, it's their happiness, it's the storytelling, it's all of it. So for me, you know, I think networking made sense, you know, to teach people how you build relationships better. So that's what I do. So I do, you know, that's the bulk of my business now. This has really
so
been...
the networking, the networking,
Yeah.
the core of that, because that term, what does networking? I think you hit it. Networking is really building relationships.
Yes.
Not from a sense of, oh, I got to meet that person because they might give me an order.
Right.
But how do I build a relationship with good people? But you want business to.
Sure.
So
yeah. So how
a
do
lot
you
of
do
times,
that?
a lot of times networking, and you probably hear this, but I mean, let's switch gears. It's kind of, it's a little sleazy kind of. I'm just going. I got to make sure I meet these 2-3 people because they could help me with business.
Yeah.
What's your thought on that?
I'm making a face because I'm like,
as you got that big smile.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I hear that from some people, and I never personally think of networking as sleazy because that's not how I operate.
Because you're selfless.
But also I encounter a lot of people like that. You know, just the ones that are like, hey, this is my company, and here's my card, and they'll
tell you what they could do for you already.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think it's so important. I mean, we only met a little while ago, but we met at an event around storytelling, and I think even just meeting people that you don't know, it's still around storytelling, right? It's still around getting to know people. So I really try to teach people questions that they can bring to an event or an interaction with people that will be personal. I think a lot of people think as networking as somewhere where they have to not bring their full self.
Right.
There has to be this front, this is what I do, and I work for this law
I'm
firm.
real estate, software, sales, whatever, versus I'm Danny or I'm Jennifer.
Right, and it's not that. It's as simple as like sharing something about your kids or your dogs, or having a common bond over being runners or traveling to Hong Kong. Or it can be so many things, but just kind of teaching people methods to have real conversations.
Right. So business should not be a top agenda.
No.
In the meeting.
Although I definitely do sessions to help people learn their 30-second pitches and all that good stuff. I'm not saying that stuff isn't important.
Right.
I'm just saying, when you're meeting people for the first time, it's not about the business. It's not about the deal or the sale or the client or the customer. It's just about, is this somebody that I want to get to know better? Do I have a warm and fuzzy feeling, about them that makes me feel like I want to follow up after this encounter? Or do I not want to follow up? It's all about that first impression.
Yeah. And tell us again then, where can they find you? We're going to wrap up, but just give them that right now.
Sure. So you can reach me at jennifer@purposefulnetworking.com. That's my direct email. I'm on Instagram and Twitter at RUNetworked, AREYOU Networked.
Yes, you
and
are.
then my website, purposefulnetworking.com.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. I'm going to ask you a question. A lot of people ask me my accident. They'll say, do you wish it didn't happen? I'm not going to tell you how I answer that, but let me ask you that question. Do you wish that didn't happen?
I wish it didn't happen. But there's always a but, right? I wish it didn't happen because I'm not the same person that I was. But also, it's positive that I'm not the same person that I was. So, it's obviously, this is years later, I'm still dealing with a lot of things, less than I was dealing with.
Sure.
But I'll never be the same physically or emotionally. So, of course, I wish it didn't happen. I wish it didn't happen because, my husband would have had more time to spend with his parents while they were, dying of cancer, both of them. I wish it didn't happen because I would have had more time to spend with them. There's so many reasons, right?
Yeah.
But I was really, I think like a lot of people, in a rut. I thought my life was great.
Yeah.
I was on a path, from the time I was little. I come from a family of lawyers. My dad's a really well-known lawyer. I've always wanted to be a lawyer. And, I just thought I'd continue on a certain path. Kind of that Groundhog Day where you go day in and day out and don't really think about how can I be happier and how can I make positive change in the world. And so I feel like none of that would have come about had I not had the accident.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And thank you for that. When sometimes when I ask that question, people at home might be going, Danny, how could you ask that question?
Yeah.
Of course she would. Who wants to get run over by a truck?
Right.
Right. And so close to death. So I don't ask that from a callous place.
No, I didn't take it that way.
I get it. Yeah. I get it so many times, and I'm sure you get it. But what's interesting is, and I think it comes back to, and you and I know this, they say to me, do you wish it didn't happen? Well, I wish my friend didn't die.
Right.
But the growth that I've had coming out of that adversity, and I think that's the key. I would always have a saying, and jump in, we're chatting here, where I'd say life is not perfect, and that's okay. But I've started to shift a little bit more to say life is perfect the way it unfolds. And for some of us, there's going to be greater challenges. And it's in those challenges where we truly become who we are meant to be, right?
Yes.
Versus who we are born to be.
Or just doing what we're good at. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, don't interrupt.
I think there's that point where you do things that you're good at because you're good at them. And you never consider whether they're actually your purpose, your passion, what makes you happy.
Our purpose, right?
Yeah.
I mean, look at what your accident has enabled you to do.
Yeah.
In terms of touching people.
Absolutely.
That you may not have done as well. You still would have done more.
No, not really. I was working for an insurance company.
Yeah. Without my accident, I was probably going to go sell real estate in Aspen, Colorado and ski a lot.
Right,
I mean,
there you go.
Okay, great, maybe, but
yeah.
But maybe not. So, it's interesting because if you watch the podcast before, Jennifer, that we did with Pat Croce.
Oh, and
you love Pat.
I don't know him personally, but I'm like, he's
yeah. But we had the same conversation, and he said, looked right at the camera, and he said, listen, the universe, it doesn't give a shit what you want.
No, it doesn't.
It gives you what you need.
Yes.
And again, it's so cool when, and I acknowledge you for this, when I meet somebody who's been through that struggle and still comes out and saying, yeah, I wish it didn't happen, but here's how I got through it, and here's how I grew from it.
I mean, and I think similar to you, I think one of my big goals for 2020 is to do more of this, more of the here's my story, here's how it can help people.
Oh, you have to.
Not less about, certainly I love the networking piece, but more motivational speaking.
You have to.
And I bring that up because I'm constantly amazed, and I don't mean this in any kind of egotistical way, I'm amazed at how many people reach out and tell me that they're inspired. Because, when you go through something, you're inspired. I was this angry, depressed person. I'm just trying to live my life,
Yeah.
But I mean, when I hear things like that, it really moves you to feel like I'm going in the right direction. And there are so many people that are going through struggles that I can help.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have done that as an insurance defense attorney.
And you're doing it. That's why when I met you, I was like, wow, she's cool. And then I saw this article. I'm like, oh my gosh, that happened to her.
Yeah.
And that's why I hit you. I said, hey, Jennifer, would you ever?
Yes.
Because the whole point of this podcast is for people like you to connect with people like you that are listening to support one another on this wonderful journey called life.
Absolutely.
Which is perfect.
And meeting people like you who have been through, life-changing experience and other people that I've met along the way, I mean, that's inspired me. It's not a lot of people that have been through things like that, right?
Yeah.
So it's a small group of us. Yeah.
So for the person listening out there, he or she that is stuck in the struggle a little bit right now, in search of some inspiration, what are 3 messages that you would offer to them?
So
3 messages.
Probably my favorite quote that I post all the time is somebody named Carl Bard, and it goes something like, you can't go back and create the start, but you can create a brand new ending. So
I like it.
That's I might have the wording a little wrong, but
that's all right.
But that's what I would tell people. Is,
we write our story, right?
We write our story. Start from where you are. And similar to networking, I mean, people will come into sessions with me and say, I hate events. I hate going to rooms. I don't know people. Et cetera, et cetera. And I say, okay, go to your next event, meet one person, and leave. And so I'm kind of use that parallel for the second piece, which is just try to take the baby step. So there were literally days where, like I said, I would literally make a list because I couldn't remember it and say, brush teeth and get dressed.
Right.
And if I did that, that was a good day.
You're off and running.
Right? If I made it to the CVS to pick up my medicine, I was rolling.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, if you have to do that and you have to take the baby step, take the baby step. And also get help. Don't get help. Don't feel like, I felt like at some point, I'm an intelligent person. I have multiple degrees. I should be able to kick the ass of this situation myself, right?
Seek support, right?
But I couldn't. And you have to come to that realization that there are lots of great people out there to help you with things, whether it's medical practitioners or just support in your own tribe.
Yeah.
But you have to reach out and you have to be willing to say, these are the things that are wrong. It's hard, especially with what I'm doing now, to say, I have a brain injury, and of course, went closer to when it happened. There were the people who said things like, well, you're having a conversation and you seem okay. And, you really want to punch people in the face when they say things like that, right? I did. I want to punch people in the face. I box. So, I want to punch people in the face.
I saw you boxing on that.
Yeah. So, but, where was I going with this?
But you take a breath and a pause.
You take a breath. And I think, some people will say things to me now like, aren't you afraid to admit that you had a brain injury and you still have these kind of deficiencies that are, that you struggle with when you want people to hire you for companies? And I said, no, I'm not. Because that's the third piece of advice I'd give, that about no perfection. It's based on impact. So there are days where I go speak where I feel like things are flowing a lot better than others. And you speak, so you probably know what I'm talking about,
Amen,
right?
sister.
Right?
Yes, yes.
But I feel like even the times where I don't feel like it goes as smooth for one reason or another, there's an impact. There's an impact that you make.
Sure.
And that's what drives you to keep doing it and sharing your story. And so, think about that if you're out there. It doesn't have to be speaking, regardless of what you're doing or what your plan is in life. Are you going to make an impact? It doesn't matter if it's perfection, if you're if you're flawless at it, but you're going to impact somebody, and somebody's going to see this and think, if they were able to get through this, I can get through what I'm dealing with.
Absolutely.
So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your
much.
time and coming here. I just want to acknowledge your spirit. The human spirit is much stronger. The human spirit is much, much stronger than we give it credit for, and you're testimony to that.
Thank you.
So I look forward to our friendship developing even more. And for those of you out there, back to life, listen to what Jennifer said and start to experiment with some of it, because there's tremendous wisdom in there. So until next time, be well.
Bye.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Wow, right? I mean, just wow. Thanks a lot for joining another episode of our Back to Life podcast. I've got to guess that you're inspired by Jennifer's story, and you can take away a few of her insights to begin applying in your own life. It struck me that she knows the importance of seeking support and being sure to ask for the help that you need when you need it. I also loved toward the end of our conversation when she led us to the eternal realization, and I can never hear this enough, my friends, that the human spirit is way stronger than we often think it is. So if you enjoyed this episode and you gained value, please share this with a friend or two that you believe will also gain value and maybe need some inspiration in their life. And perhaps even share it through your social media channels. Until next time, understand that each day you get the gift of coming back to life. So be certain to create a lot of happiness and a lot of fulfillment in your life. Because that, my friends, is what you're here for.